Excellent. You should be able to see that one.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah,
You're good to go.
Yep. That's good.
When you shut it, just don't shut it all the way.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to be talking with you for a little while, just very casually, on website accessibility and managing your risks and understanding the benefits to you for incorporating accessibility into your project. And I've got Nick Lee with me, who's from Bank West, and he's going to be talking to you about what they do with their risk from there. And I'll get Nick to introduce himself in just a second. WebKit is a consulting firm here in Perth. We specialize in website accessibility, auditing, consulting, and working with developers. We work with all levels of government, with corporate, and with not-for-profit. And Nick, why don't you say who you are?
Apparently it's on the slide. So I'm Nick. I look after the customer experience part of the digital team at Bank West. So we've got a team of about 32, 33 who look after the front end of digital. So that's basically the online content and the projects and the pieces that get done. So I'm picking up a piece of accessibility that was put in play a long time ago, and resurfacing it and partnering up with Vivienne to get it delivered. We are going through a bit of change at the moment. We're looking at future platforms. So it's really an opportune time for us to get on with it. So good to be baking in the standards that we need right from the start.
Okay, so today we're going to be looking at what the legal mandates and the requirements are for your website, and whether or not these mandates are sufficient to make sure that your websites that you build meet the uses of your clients, wondering about whether there's guidelines and conformance levels that you must meet, and looking at what the risks are and whether you understand the risks for non-compliance for your website. The websites, the guidelines that we use are called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They have been developed by a group, an international group that many of you will be familiar with, W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium. The director of W3C is Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the web. This group is, yay. So this group is represented by firms all over the world. There's about 246 member organizations and many invited experts. They work together on a no-cost benefit. There are 10 member organizations in Australia, one of which is the Australian government, Vision Australia, myself, my firm, Media Access. There's a few members, but there's only 9 in Australia. We're hoping that that will grow. And we work together in developing the guidelines, developing the policies, and helping companies learn how to implement these. And I also work on the research development group at W3C, and we're looking at new innovations that are coming up in the way of web technology, and particularly how we can make those accessible to as many people as possible. So in Australia, we refer to it as WCAG. I'm going to move back a bit so I don't have to keep turning my head around. We require in Australia that your website meet the AA level of these WCAG guidelines in order to avoid prosecution or litigation under the Disability Discrimination Act of 1992. That is the act that will be thrown at you if what you develop is not accessible and somebody complains. Now, we have less litigious society here than they do in the States. In the States, the National Federation for the Blind simply sues you. It just, don't pass go, don't collect $200, just go straight to court. In Australia, we have a far more friendly system. So if I'm blind and I have a problem with a website that you develop, what I do is I come to you and I say, I can't use your website, I'm having problems, I need you to fix this. If you say, go away, I don't care, or yeah, we'll do it, then I go to the Australian Human Rights Commission and I lodge a complaint. From that, it costs me nothing to do that. From that point on, you're going to need a lawyer. The Australian Human Rights Commission, under disability discrimination, they will try and mediate the complaint to try and persuade you that it's really in your best interest to fix it. If you do not fix it, they will give the person leave to sue you civilly. And then it's going to cost big time. And many of you are aware of the case with Coles. They were just recently taken to court, and they have settled out of court now. But what happened, it was a blind user, and she had been using the Coles website for years to do her online shopping. And they did a revamp of the website, at which point she could no longer use it. And she told them she couldn't use it, and they just weren't going to fix it. Sorry, no, not going to happen. Can't be bothered, can't afford it, whatever they said. And so she went to Human Rights, and Human Rights tried to get them to do it, and they wouldn't do it. So they were taken to court. They've now settled out of court for an undisclosed sum and agreed that they will never allow their website to get in that condition again. So instead of the cost of fixing it right away, they've had the bad publicity, they've had the loss of their reputation, and legal fees from the day the complaint was made to Australian Human Rights. So it would have been far cheaper, because they had to fix it anyway, far cheaper to fix it in the first place. And we often have clients say to us, well, you know, nobody's really going to sue me. I'll just kind of wait, and if I get a fine, I get a fine. We say, no. You get a fine, and you still have to fix it. You're not going to get away. Somebody's going to be watching you from here on. There's been some monumental cases in the past in Australia and elsewhere, and I'll be looking at that just a little bit about litigation that's happened. But it's not all about the litigation and those kind of risks. It's the risk to your business, to your brand. Coles now is known as having a problem with accessibility. And so what would have happened to the customers who had disabilities when they heard that Coles was now in front of the court because of the lack of accessibility? Where would they go? To the competitor. Okay? So it's the loss of business as well. But we also want to look at the benefits as to how it will be better for your business and better for you if you build accessibility in from the start. So if you try to make sure that what you're developing is accessible for as many people as possible, you're going to have that many more customers, you're going to have a more positive experience for your customers, and they're all going to be happy, and you're not going to end up at Human Rights, because that now will stay on Human Rights books under the list of people who have had complaints against them, against Coles. Their name is on the book. You don't get it taken down when it gets settled. So, risks. So I've got in these slides, which will be available, so don't worry too much about the links and things in here. I've got links to the guidelines, and the other thing about WCAG is it's now an ISO standard. So if you're working for a corporate firm who may or may not understand W3C and the WCAG guidelines, they do get ISO. And that's what we think is one of the best benefits of ISO adopting the WCAG guidelines as the standard for website accessibility, is the fact that the corporate world understand ISO. They pay for ISO for their financial systems, for their occupational health and safety, so they understand ISO compliance. So when you tell them that the standard for website accessibility is an ISO standard, there's that recognition there of the importance of it. So it all came about via the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Australia was one of the first signers and ratifiers on that UN Convention. So that means we have an international obligation for all websites that are hosted on Australian servers. Not just government, non-profit, corporate, everybody has to abide by these guidelines. So we have an obligation. So in order to get the government to start things rolling, they developed the National Transition Strategy for Website Accessibility that applied to government, and it ran for 4 years. It was finished in December, by which point, December 31st, all government websites were supposed to be at the AA level of WCAG. Well, I can tell you about 2 made it. One of them was one of the government websites. So it hasn't got there, but they got a lot better. My doctorate thesis was in observing what happened with a legislated approach like this, and whether or not such a legislated approach meant that the government websites became accessible, and whether there was a follow-on effect for the non-government sites. We found that the federal government sites were the most accessible to start with, and became even more so. The state governments got worse, the local governments got worse, the not-for-profits got worse, and the corporates got worse by about 300%. So you think about, well, why did they get worse? Are they breaking things? What are they doing? What happened is that they've never fixed the initial problem, and whatever is the latest fad, they want the developers to add that onto the website now. So-and-so down the road has this kind of a slide carousel, I want one too. So instead of fixing the base problems, they just keep adding to it. So the scores for their accessibility just went downhill by the day. And they're not fixing things. They get a website developed and they think that's fine until they decide to do another website. And they just leave it there and they don't do maintenance and updating work. They just leave things there with all their problems and are all surprised when people have problems with using them. Now, after we talk for a minute, you'll be able to, when you go back, understand some of the reasons why you hate certain websites. There are certain websites that even if I wasn't familiar with accessibility, I don't like to use. I can't find stuff on them. It doesn't behave the way I want. It's got stuff moving all over the place. It's not a happy place to be. You want your customers to come back to your website. Therefore, if it's accessible, it will be more useful by all of your clients, not just those with disabilities. Does that make sense? By the way, if you've got a question, interrupt me at any point in time. I don't mind. Tim Berners-Lee has a very famous statement that the web is an opportunity for unprecedented interaction for people with disabilities. Picture, if you will, somebody who is blind. Now, 20 years ago, if they were able to live independently, they would have had somebody have to take them to the grocery store. And when they get to the grocery store, there's no Braille labels on anything in our stores, is there? So how do they know flour from sugar? Let alone, how can they find the gluten-free corn flour as opposed to the corn flour with gluten? There's nothing to help them. They have to have somebody always helping them. The web changes their lives incredibly because they can decide, I want the 250 grams of the White Wings corn flour without gluten. And they can be independent. They can pay for it and they can have it delivered as long as the website works. If you can't get keyboard access to the delivery mechanisms, if you can't put in a credit card payment, if you can't tell where and when you want it delivered, then you can't do that. You lose your independence. There was a court case in the US, they have drive-through tellers. So they have banks that have sort of a drive-through thing. And so one of the banks was getting sued because the drive-through teller machine was not accessible. And the hue and cry was, well, that's ridiculous. Who that would be blind, etc., would be driving a car, so why would they need it? They'd go in the branch. My friend, Dr. Scott Hollier, who will be here tomorrow, he travels a lot. He does a lot of public speaking, he travels a lot, and he has to take taxis. So if he was in the States and he needed to take a taxi and he needed to get some money out of the bank, he would have the bank use a thing. So how's he going to get his money? He's going to have to give his credit card to the taxi driver with his PIN. That's scary enough, but how does he know that he gets his bank card back and not somebody's Kohl's reward card? How does he know the person took 100 and gave him 100? They could have taken 1,000 and given him 100. You look at your loss of security and your loss of independence. So it is important. In the States, they've got, the Department of Transport now has got a rule that they've got a deadline that all of the self-service kiosks in airports that are put in by the airlines have to be accessible by, I think it's next year, or the airlines will not be allowed to fly through or land in U.S. airports. So Qantas is going to have to change all of their terminals because they've got to be able to do it. Because what happens? There's nobody to help you otherwise. I just recently traveled and trying to find somebody to help you because everything's self-service kiosks everywhere. And Scott will tell you when he travels, and we laugh at him traveling at Perth Airport, he arrives at the airport by himself, he gets dropped off. And I said to him, well, how do you find your departure gate? Well, I kind of walk around banging into pillars and things until somebody sees me and helps me along to find my departure gate. And he's really funny about it, but he obviously has to allow himself a lot of extra time because how would you find your departure gate in an airport if you couldn't see? He's legally blind, has a very small amount of vision, but he's got a white cane. And he figures that sooner or later somebody's going to see him with his white cane banging into pillars, and take him to the correct departure gate. But you see how, I like the saying that people don't have disabilities. They have situational impairments, but we disable them by putting barriers in their path to being able to operate independently. So what we want to help you guys see is the reason for taking down those barriers, removing the barriers so that people have an equal playing field. So we need to meet level AA of the WCAG guidelines in order to avoid prosecution under the Disability Discrimination Act. This DDA is administered by the Australian Human Rights Commission. So picture this person who has complained about Coles, and Coles think they don't have to do anything. So she lodges her complaint with the Australian Human Rights Commission, who happen to administer the Disability Discrimination Act. What chance have you got of yours being able to defend that suit properly when Australian Human Rights are administering the act on behalf of that person? So if your complaint gets to that point, you may as well settle and fix your website really quickly. Because they even state that in some cases they will assist the person with their litigation. So they want people to complain so that it gets changed, because people haven't embraced the change voluntarily. And it's the only thing, if we don't take personal responsibility, it has to be imposed in some way. So there's some just some links up there that you can have later, and it's got links to the Australian Human Rights Guidelines on disability discrimination for websites. So we need to meet the guidelines to level AA. This includes non-government websites, and there's a link there that talks about the requirements. By December 31st of 2013, all non-government websites were supposed to be at AA in order to avoid litigation. And as I said, you'd be really hard pressed to find websites that do meet the guidelines. So everybody's got work to do, and everybody needs to start thinking about being as inclusive as possible in the design of your website. It's a whole lot cheaper to design accessibly than it is to design, have an audit, and have to go back and fix everything. Not only that, but if you're telling somebody that their colors are all wrong with insufficient contrast, and they're already emotionally committed to colors, which we're all very emotional about our branding colors, you're going to have a fight on your hands. So the idea is to design accessibly in the first place.
I have a question.
Yes.
By website, does that include things like blogs? Like, you don't own the website, but you own the content within that website. Does that include yourself? Like, would that be like, so say if I joined up like Blogger or something like that,
Yeah.
but then I made the font really tiny and something like that, would I be up for?
You would be liable, and probably the host would be as well. It typically works on who manages it, but Blogger shouldn't allow you to make your font too small for most people to use. So they would have some obligation there as well. If you're a developer and you develop a website for a client and it's not accessible and the client gets sued, they're going to be naming you as well if you're the developer, because they're going to be saying, but so-and-so told me they were doing it to AA standard. And so your procurement is really important. If you're an organization, you're procuring website services, you need to make sure that you find from your developer evidence that they understand the guidelines, they know how to do it, and they can show you examples of websites they've done that are accessible. So if you're a developer, I would be developing a really good accessible website to use as an example for your client, because you're not going to get any government work in Australia now unless you can show that you know the guidelines. Just saying you know them doesn't work. We've had a number of government clients come to us and say, but we had it written down that it had to be AA compliant, and it isn't. We said, well, you need to send it back to them, but we've already published our launch date. And they've given it a week for testing at the end before it becomes public. We can't fix a website in a week, not if it's a big one. So you need to make sure that your developers understand the guidelines, and as developers, you need to make sure that you can convince your client and that you can prove that you do know what the guidelines are all about, and you can develop accessibly. It's going to be a very marketable skill because of the requirement, so it's worth investing your time and energy into learning those skills. Possible risks, litigation is one. The social, who would not want their clients to really like them? to be really loyal to them. We're all into loyalty programs, etc. So you want your clients to be loyal. You want them to like your brand, to like your service or whatever it is. The technical aspect, you're going to improve your search engine optimization by having an accessible website. Google loves accessible websites. There's some things in the keywords and in the analytics that if your website is designed with the right accessibility features, you will come much higher in the Google hit list. So that's important, and it's a good way to be able to sell it to a client if you're a developer, is that this will help to improve your search engine optimization. And most businesses understand that term, and they want to be in the first couple of things that Google will come up with. Financial is important as well. If I can't use your website, then I have to phone you to your help desk to get you to either send me the form or walk me through the procedure to find the form. With my bank, a couple of years ago, they wanted me to complete a form, something to do with my mortgage, changing something. And I could not find that form for love nor money. I used the search, I went through the mortgage stuff, I looked everywhere, and she kept saying, oh no, it's on the website, it's on the website. I couldn't find it. Finally, I had to get her to walk me through. It was 10 clicks from the mortgage page to find that form. Well, I'm sorry, by then I'm annoyed. You've just wasted, my time searching myself, plus my time on the phone, plus the staff time you're paying that person. It would have been better if your searching features were better and it was more intuitive. So things like that will actually cost your company less if you design them right. Australian human rights takes into consideration when preparing litigation whether or not you have sought expert advice. So if you're doing a business plan on why you want to start embracing accessibility, they will take into consider the advice that you have sought. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. And this is some information about equal access is required by law in Australia. It's not it would be a nice thing to have. It is a law. And so if you're building a website, it must be built to AA standard from the beginning. If you're fixing an old website, you had until 2 years ago to bring it up to that standard. But every new website is to be built to a minimum of the AA of the WCAG guidelines. And that incorporates things like your color contrast, your heading levels, your search features, whether you've got skip links or some way to skip blocks, whether the user can change the color contrast on the website, the font sizes, alternative text for images. Those are all things that are in A and AA, the guidelines. So there's got clear guidelines on all of those features. So the bottom line is, if it's online, it's covered by disability discrimination. So your documents that are on your website, they must be accessible. So it's not just the actual HTML, it's anything that I need an internet connection to get has to be accessible by all people. Now, even by abiding by the guidelines to AA, you can't be all things to everybody. I could have 25 different disabilities that compete for the same needs. For example, the guidelines for colorblindness and the guidelines for dyslexia compete. But what if I'm colorblind and dyslexic? So then if I've got something so that I can use my browser to personalize my style sheet, I can set it up so it works best for me. And you can put something in your accessibility statement, a little description on how I could do that. And that way you're covering your obligation, you're providing information about what I can do. If you go and look at Kohl's now and look at their accessibility help page, it will blow you away because they have covered every possible eventuality they can think of to make sure that you can get what you need. So if you look at theirs as an example of an accessibility help page, I would suggest that you copy their information and use the same sort of stuff that they've got. They tell you which screen reader works best with the shopping cart and which browser gives you the best experience with the shopping cart. Because they don't want to end up in the same situation. They may have gone a little bit overboard, but it's a really good example of how somebody's responded and say, yeah, we really missed it here. And here's some ideas of how you can have a better experience shopping on our site by using this. So it's really quite an amazing one. So some of the risks: loss of reputation, bad publicity, the increased costs for people who require personal assistance where they couldn't use your website, losing customers to other organizations. For example, many people would have gone to Woolies when they found Coles weren't cooperating. The lower use of your website than you anticipated. You may have anticipated that with your new website, 80% of your customers would use it. If it doesn't work well, that's not going to pan out. And less than half the customers, when they find out your website's not easy to use. So what are some of the issues that you might want to watch for? One of the most common is non-textual information. This is your videos, your captures, your images. They need to have some textual format to go away with the non-text. So if I've got an image, I need to explain what that image is. And that's what we call alternative text. So if there's a picture of the Prime Minister giving a speech in Darwin, the image could say, Prime Minister Tony Abbott delivers a speech on March 24th to people in Darwin. And so people who are blind don't want there to be no images. It actually breaks up the listening for them and makes it a more pleasurable experience. They don't just want plain text. So it tells me that, oh yeah, Tony Bennett was out, Tony Abbott was out talking. Yeah, he was out talking to people about whatever. So that breaks it up. But you've also got other things like, what about slide carousels that are moving all the time and they've got information all the time on them, and they've got links embedded in. How does somebody with a screen reader get that information? Have you provided it in any other format that they can get? Captchas, so that we screen out bots from our contact forms. They're virtually unusable by people with disabilities. I hate to admit it, but half the time it takes me 4 times half the time to fill in one of those captchas. And the audio is even worse that comes with those than the written one. They're horrible. So, but there's all sorts of other ways. You don't have to use a caption. There's a gazillion other things that you could do to screen out bots without having to resort to that. That's an easy, quick way to do it, but it's going to stop your audience. That's how H&R Block in the States got sued, is because they had a captcha before they could submit your tax. You had to fill out a captcha. Nobody with disabilities could fill it out, so people with disabilities had to pay to get somebody to do their tax for them. Discrimination. So it cost them big time. Yeah.
Google have a thing around that captcha where what they do is they just get you to click the button, and what it does is it doesn't just accept the input of clicking, it actually detects the mouse movement and stuff to let you know that, and they tell that you're a human clicking a button rather than a machine or a bot or something.
There's a really simple one I saw that was, you take a form field, so when you've got a form you're filling in, and you use a minus index on your tab and you hide it off the screen, and it's one that shouldn't be completed by the customer, they can't see it anyway. And if they're using a screen reader, it tells them do not click in this field. And so the bot, then you set up your system analytics so that you don't count any where there's text in that field. Screened out all the ones that are done by a bot, and it costs you nothing to do it. So there's lots of ways of doing it. Forms are a big problem. You have to have a label, it has to say what the form field is in, it has to let you in there to complete it, and it has to tell you what you need to put. How many times have you and I tried to put a phone number in, and then it immediately says, please don't use your area code, or please put brackets, or please no spaces. But it didn't tell me that to start with. It waits till I make an error and then tells me what to do. And then half the time it takes you back to the form you were in, and dumps all the data that you put in there to start when you have to start all over again. That's just really unfriendly design, but this is where accessibility and usability cross. That's going to make everybody mad, not just people with disabilities. The structure, having headings to break it up visually as well, but also people with screen readers navigate via the heading levels. So they can say, take me to the next heading 1, or take me to all headings, or show me a heading at a time, or give me a list of the headings, and they work like links and they can go straight there. They don't have to listen to 300 navigational items in your complex menu. You can imagine if you can't use a mouse and you're having to click with tab. You've seen some of those massive mega menus. Can you imagine having on every page, so you finally get to what you want, you click on it, it takes you to the next page, and you have to do it all over again. So it's bad design, but it's also inaccessible. I've got a couple of examples here just to sort of provide some more illustration of what we're talking about. So I've got Sarah, she's a financial advisor. She can't use a mouse due to a medical condition that makes her handshakes. She uses the web to source information about monetary matters for her clients. Somebody that you could identify with. Sam's a freelance journalist, particular interest in the rights of people with disabilities, legally blind and uses a screen reader and magnification software. And Connor is actually, it's not his name, but it's somebody that we know. He's in year 5, hearing impaired. His teacher wears a special microphone that's tuned to his hearing aids. He uses the internet for communication, fact finding, and an online math program that his school set for homework. These are real people. These are some of the situations. You would be surprised how many people cannot or do not want to use a mouse, including many developers. It's often quicker to use keyboard navigation than it is to use a mouse. But if you are new to computers, say if you've come in from another country, English isn't your first language, you're expected to work with the government via the internet, and you're not familiar with this mouse thing. That's hard. It's hard for people who don't have the eye-hand coordination or who are getting older and they've got a bit of shake and your links are really tiny. How do you get it onto the contact spot for the link? So a lot of people will use keyboard only. And so you've got to make sure that they can reach every one of the features via keyboard only. So links not being properly described. If you're using a screen reader, how would you love it if you got to a link and it said http://www, and it read for about, some of these links are about 2 lines long. All it had to say was our help sheet. Link, and so you'd hear link, our help sheet. Okay, that's what I want. You don't have to use the whole URL. You can have the link that's displayed in a text that is friendly to the user. Moving content and audio. If I start a website and it immediately comes on with audio, I can't hear my screen reader because I can't hear it over the audio. And then if I'm blind, how do I find where to turn off the audio if there is a feature? So that makes the website completely unusable for me. Moving content, it's not just for people with visual problems. People with dyslexia need to be able to stop that content, and same with people with epilepsy. You can actually be causing seizures by having moving content. So you don't want to be in the position where you could actually be in a whole heap of legal problems by causing an epileptic seizure. And we covered keyboard access and visibility. When you're designing your websites or getting a website designed, make sure that the user who isn't using a mouse knows which link they're on. Quite often developers take off the default, the little dotted gray line that goes around a link. So if I'm looking at it, I don't know where I am. What we've done on our website is we've reversed the focus. So if the background is dark blue and the text is white, when the cursor is on that link, it does the reverse. It's dark blue on white. So it's even if I'm colorblind, I can still see the change in contrast and be able to locate my cursor. There's a whole heap of things that you can do that just make it a better experience. Color contrast, you need to have 4.5 to 1 foreground to background, so text to your background, in order to pass the AA guideline. That also means the difference between links that are in focus and not in focus, links in the middle of a paragraph to the adjacent text. So if you have dark gray for the link in focus next to black text, I can't see if I've got low vision what link is in focus there. So you've got to make sure that there's enough contrast to it, or adding underlines or taking away the underline that's already there. Something that's a secondary indicator so the person knows. Don't use color to show importance. On one of the SES sites in one of the other states when I was doing some auditing, their emergency number came up in red letters and immediately scrolled off the top of the screen. If I'm in a panic, first of all, it'd be helpful if I wasn't colorblind. If I was, I wouldn't have even noticed it. But it immediately scrolled off. I'm in a panic and I've just lost my emergency number. So they've used color alone and then they've taken it off the screen. You've got to wonder, how, is it going to come back? What am I going to do? How do I find it? Language and readability. Do not have the language on your website at any higher than a grade 10 level. And if you think, well, what is grade 10 level? The West Australian's written at about grade 7 level. So think about it. You try and have it in common, easy to understand language. You may think that you're quite the intellectual and you want your website to reflect that, but do you want people to actually understand what you're trying to promote? Help the user, help them to avoid making mistakes rather than make them go back and correct it. If you want them to put in a phone number, for heaven's sakes, phone number. No spaces, please do not include area code. Oh, okay, and I just type it in, rather than make me have to go back and fix it later. There's some really good guidelines that you can see. So these are just a few of the issues, but by working on them, you're actually going to be improving the experience for everybody. Your staff will like it more, you will like it more, your customers will like it more, and you won't be blocking people with disabilities from being able to do business with you. Try to ensure that the essential contact is easily located. Don't make them go more than 3 clicks to find something that you think is essential. Make sure your search and help functions are easy to identify and that they behave appropriately. If you allow them to enter anything and it presents rubbish for results, then they have to go back. But if you say, enter your keyword, and they do it, that's great. If they click on enter and they haven't entered anything, then you tell them that some text keywords need to be entered into the search field. And just keep it in simple language. So what do? We need to get educated. We need to understand the guidelines, to know what our responsibilities are. We need to get good advice. Develop an action plan. How are you going to start addressing the issues on your own website? How are you going to make sure you embed it in the process? So it's not just an end of development thing. It should be right from the beginning design, and it should be embedded in your processes. And understanding that this is not going to be something that's a once in time. Because if you're a developer, the day you give your client the website is the day they start breaking it. They start adding new content, making changes because you've given them some rights into the CMS, and they can break it before you know it. So have you added in something that's going to stop the client messing it up? The Department of Agriculture, anybody who adds a page now in the department, in their new website, they have to actually fill in, I have checked this, I have done this, I have done this, my name is this, my number is this. So that if there's a problem, they know who did it and when. And they'll tell them to go back, you need to check this out because you've missed some guidelines. So there's some personal ownership and building it into your processes. So first of all, what should you do? Now, full audit costs money to have done. You need an agency that knows how to do it. Please check their references and their affiliations. If it's a developer that's doing it in their spare time and it's just been an interest, that's the kind of result you're likely to get. You need to, DBA say that you need to have expert advice, but you can do some initial checking yourself. I put a link here to W3C's Easy Checks guidelines. These are things that you can start to do yourself to check your developments. And they're really good. They've got tutorials up there. The Easy Check says, okay, if you want to check that your title is appropriate, here's how you do it. If you want to check that all your images have appropriate alternative text, here's how you do it. Now, you may think with images and alternative text that, just has some explanation. I've seen a page that had 57 images and they all said thumbnail for the alternative text. It wasn't terribly helpful. And I've seen another one, it was a Victoria government website, and it had a picture of a lady using a telephone. And the alternative text read, lady on phone. Now, if I've come from another country, the language might not be clear. She's sitting on it, or what is she doing? And what is a phone when I understand it as a telephone? But the problem is that it would have read image link lady on phone. It should have read image link use our new 24-hour call service. Think about the information you're portraying with that image. Why is it there? If it's decorative, you can code it out, you can put a null out so it'll be okay. But if it's actually there for a purpose, to portray some information, think about the information you're portraying rather than the literal of what it is. So if I was blind and I heard image link lady on phone, as opposed to image link use our new 24-hour call center, and I realized that there was somebody there to give me personal assistance, particularly for somebody with a disability, how How much better would that be in my experience? And all it is a couple of words. So think about what you're portraying. As said, the easy checks that's there. I really suggest you go in and have a look at that and start to use it and understand it. It gives you a very good entry. The WCAG document is enormous, isn't it? It's gigantic. And it's got a lot of technical stuff because it covers JavaScript, it covers all sorts of different technical aspects. But the easy checks is in nice, simple language that you can use to get started. And I think you'll find it really helpful. It will help you prepare for an audit, rather like preparing for a financial audit. When you prepare for, you've got auditors coming in, you try and make sure you've got all your documentation, all where they can find it, everything's filed properly, and it's going to make it quicker, less painful, less expensive. The same way with a website audit. If you do a bunch of cleanup work in-house, make sure all your images have alternative text, make sure all your links are explanatory, make sure that your font sizes, etc. are correct. Then a website audit is going to go quicker and cost a whole lot money. And so you can do some stuff yourself, but be aware, if I told the tax department that I decided not to get a financial auditor in this year because I thought I could do a really good job myself, they would just laugh at me. So the validity of your audit will depend upon having an external auditor when you get to that stage. But there's a lot that you can do prior to getting to having an audit completed. So benefits, social factors. You're going to have much happier customers watching your time. The technical factors, reduced server load, improved search engine optimization, financial factors we've covered. If the website meets the needs of your users, then they're going to be far happier using it and they're not going to be phoning you with all the questions. And thinking about the people with disabilities that we've already talked about. There's a massive range of people with disabilities, and it's important to try and consider the needs of these users. And Nick,
hello,
there
I'm
you
still
are.
here.
You're still
Sorry,
here.
I'm still reflecting on Scott's experience at Perth Airport, trying to find a departure gate. Yeah, 2 weeks ago, I couldn't find a departure forward. I'm like, guys, tellies are really cheap. Go see cameras. Anyway, so Bank West's experience. So I'm quite new to the bank. I've only been there a couple of months. And I picked up as I mentioned, the content area, which we quickly morphed into customer experience area because that's what our customers experience quite often. Transactional bank, a lot of it's now online and a lot of it's self-service. So obviously for us, it's really a business prerogative to make sure that our services are accessible to all of our clients. And if we think the list that Vivienne just showed you, is perhaps 1 in 5 people are effectively one way or another pricing. So why would we exclude 20% of our potential audience? That's just not good business. So for us, it's a real key thing to push in. As I said, it's a transactional platform. The challenge for us is it's a huge piece. It's got multiple owners. You can imagine in any large corporate, there's multiple stakeholders. There's multiple lines of business. They all kind of congeal onto a website platform, and you've got to deal with a lot of people to get stuff done. So it does take a bit of will to have a central contact point and put some standards in place. We're really lucky we've got a lot of passionate people around the business who are committed to UX, CX, and accessibility. So they all pull together and we're all working on the same standards. So that's the biggest win for any corporate, is to have everybody on side. And that's your challenge. You've got to get the culture behind you. And once you've got the culture behind you, you usually get the finance behind you. One doesn't generally come without the other. For us, again, it's an absolute no-brainer to make sure the small pockets of budget to be able to engage services like Vivienne's to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Absolutely no-brainer. We've had it on the radar for a lot of time. With any business, there's always commercial reasons to do things. So accessibility is a foundation we must have, but we've still got to make time to do it, especially to train up home developers and make sure the standards are in there when the coding is being done. But for us, as I mentioned at the start, really opportune time to get it done. We're looking at what the next platform is. Please don't look too closely at our website. It's ancient. I know. It was, it was done slightly before the last ice age, but we are looking at new platforms. So we're going to do a twofold process, really. We get the new standards. We're going to get an audit done across the correct sample number of pages in order to deliver anything that we need to know. We will retrofit certain stuff if there's some big issues on the site, but really it's a forward-facing piece so that we can look at making some real solid foundations for the next instance. Okay, do you want to join it?
Yeah.
Okay, over to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so audit size for us, we've got 3,500 pages, 3,450 of which I've never looked at. Don't say that, seriously. No, there's a lot of content on there, but for that size, to give you an indication, we're looking at about auditing 50 pages. We don't have too many functions, a lot of it is information and content driven, but we do need to get the full spectrum to make sure that we look at every piece that we need to. Noticeably our app, because that's a relatively new platform, that's got actually really good accessibility, particularly the iPhone, because the universal access functions on the phone is built in. The app's dead simple. It rates really well because it's dead simple, and it works really well because it's dead simple. That's a real benefit. Behind all the work that we're doing, we've got two of our strategic platforms are customer experience and simplicity. So I'm managing to convince everybody we need a smaller, leaner, faster, smarter website. Well, that's great because that provides clarity, provides ease of use, it improves the user experience, which ultimately is a foundation for accessibility. So there's a lot going on there. As I said, remedial work will be done. We'll have a cross-divisional team looking at this whole thing, which is great. We've got Dr. Scott Hollier in this afternoon, giving the whole UX guild a piece. For us, it's really interesting that we're actually, if you don't know, part of the Commonwealth Bank Group. They leave us alone, they just own us. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. But they have excellent standards that they've got right through the organisation of universal design. So we can leverage that and use what we need to do. I've got some really good relationships with those guys. So as a parent company, there's something great to look to. They've been through the journey as well. The strength that they've had has been over the last 18 months. They've really built up the visibility of accessibility across their organisation, which is a huge one. They've even gone so far as we've mentioned the colour contrast ratio. You can imagine the brand ownership across Combank must be significant. So when the web team come in and say, guess what, gold? Yeah, it's not working for us. We're going to change it and darken it. And I've been there before because I used to work with Curtin who had gold, which is muddy brown to most people. They had to change it, and the guys are actually open to doing that. Now we've got the same. Some fantastic person chose for bright orange as a brand colour many years ago. And right, thanks guys. That renders wonderfully on a daytime screen on my phone, doesn't it? So I have to work with orange. But again, demonstrating how collaborative the organisation is, we've just had a swathe of new brand colours come through. Because creative people like new brand colours. So they didn't have a platform of whether they would meet contrast standards, and collaboratively we worked with the marketing team to say, guys, we need to go darker, we need to go sexier with our colours in order to make them have any kind of contrast ratio across the site. And they were completely open to it and said, sure, okay, what's your version? Let's work that in. And it worked both ways, so we've really got some good materials across all platforms now. So we benefited them, they benefited us. Good win that one. It was interesting, we talked about the variance of people's various disabilities or however you want to say the spectrum of things. But a friend of mine, good friend of mine is a developer. He has a vision spectrum disorder around colour. So basically he struggles with red and green, which is why he's a code monkey, because we're saying don't ask me to design a thing, it'll all be brown. And we look at our mobile website, because we do have two separate instances, and we use those old brown colours as navigational colours. So buttons, labels, everything, they're all in the different colours. And they vary from cyan to green to dark green to red. So to him, he pulls the thing up and goes, beautiful, well that's light brown, mid-brown, dark brown, a bit more mid-brown, and that one's mid-brown as well. Like, yeah, we have to consider some much simpler standards for what we're doing here, guys, because colour only works for 80% of folks. The other 20% are going to struggle. So again, we get the conversation started and people take it on board and it's working well. So flip me again. Oh, I'm done. That was a quick one, wasn't it?
Did you get them all?
I think I got them all, yeah. It is a big piece. It's really encouraging. The organisation is on side. It can be done. As soon as you start risk, yeah. If you need a really big lever, go and talk to your risk people. As a bank, we're subject to an awful lot of legislation, an ASIC, an independent body, looking at what we do, making sure we don't mislead anybody, and that includes the provision of technical services. So very, very cognizant. So I flagged accessibility standards to our risk department, who completely embraced it and said, we didn't even know about this stuff. And of course, the conversation starts. We are aware of a few people, we haven't mentioned ING yet. Financial services are being looked at. We do consider ourselves a service, as a utility. You know, it's not a nice to have in many respects, it's a must have. You need a bank account with credit to transact. So we are absolutely necessary, and therefore risk we take very seriously, and risk want to ensure that we have universal access to all of our services. So they've embraced it as well, and they completely support us and are offering us legal and financial support in everything we're doing. So use a risk lead if your company won't move on stuff. That's a big one. So again, big win for us, the guys that are all over it.
Okay, so we talked about the enforceability of it, so you've got, that'll all be there available. And I've got just a few resources there, and that's who I am. I'm with WebPIT, and there's Nick, and we're, are you headed straight back, or are you?
I've got a few minutes for questions.
Okay, is there any questions? Anybody want to? Yes.
Vivienne, I just wanted to ask you talked about some of the federal government departments that met that accessibility by this December to order there. Can you give us any best practice federal?
Agimo's is probably one of the very best ones, and the brand new one for the Department of Human Services, which incorporates welfare, Centrelink, Medicare. They've done a lot of work on there, so they've got some really good stuff on there. If you want to have a look at some really interesting websites in Australia and outside, you can have a look at BBC. There's one called BBC My Web, My Way, and that's one that's developed purely to teach people how to change the browser so that they get the visual experience that they need. So there's a link that says, I can't hear very well, and it tells you all the things you can do. I can't see very well, or I can't see color. So that's a good website. Our website has just been redeveloped to meet AAA. And so if you look at our website, it's WebPIT. You'll see I also have a color contrast changer built into my website. So if you need black on yellow or blue on black, etc., you can do that right on the website. And you can also see the inversion of the colors for links in focus, a few things like that, transcripts and captions on videos. They're all there. So it's one idea, but that's a commercial one. The Digital Accessibility Centre in the UK has a good user experience. But yeah, in Australia, there's not a lot. It's still been really slow. But Agimo have done a lot of work on theirs. Because they ran the National Transition Strategy, you'd want to hope that they did. But Department of Human Services is pretty good.
Gov.uk.
Yeah, Gov.uk have done a lot of work as well. And they use the DAC Centre as well for their user testing. Channel 4 in the UK is good. And also there's the last Paralympic Games, the website for that. They actually have sign language on that one. And I think they've got signing hands or an avatar that's doing the signing. Yes?
You just mentioned video content. So we're trying to get to AA on our website. We've got videos that use the YouTube iPhone embed.
Yep.
We've got closed captioning on the YouTube, clips for transcripts, audio descriptions for some of the videos that have specific information in them. And now we're called out because the YouTube player keyboard track.
Yeah, it does.
So I would go for advice on that.
There's a free accessible video player that you can download from Vision Australia's website.
Is that the easy player?
I don't think it's called Easy Player. It's on the Vision Australia site. So if you just Google Vision Australia Accessible Player, you should come up with it and embed it. If you look at our website, that's the one I've had our developer put on, and you can do it completely by keyboard, and it shows you your focus on the buttons and things. There's a number of accessible players that have been developed. Make sure you install them properly, because even with the Vision Australia one, if you don't follow the instructions really carefully, then it reverts to the YouTube instance of it, and that's got the keyboard track. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I work for a government, WA government organisation, and we were told some time ago that PDFs weren't accessible. That's since been following the federal government statement. They have since, I wouldn't say retracted it or.
Waffled a bit, yeah.
Yeah. So where are we?
The guideline is Australian human rights still says that you must have an alternative for every PDF. PDF on its own, the AGIMO stance is that it requires the person who created the source document to have done it properly, and then for it to have been properly translated into PDF, and then for the user to have the latest reader and know how to configure it for their needs. As far as AGIMO are concerned, that's too many ifs. So, and the Australian human rights say, in order to avoid prosecution under DDA, have an alternative for every PDF. And then the question comes up, why use PDF in the first place? If you have to have two, why have it at all? The best alternative is HTML because all assistive technology can read it.
Yep.
But if you've got a stakeholder that insists on a PDF version, then you're going to have to put an alternative with it.
It's a painful document for what?
Painful document.
It is.
Probably horrible, yes.
Yeah, computer make arguments. Yeah. One of the concerns is obviously the document is taken down off the websites. It's amended. Whereas PDF, why not completely secure, is a lot
Yeah.
better.
Adobe have done a very, very good job at selling that to us.
Yeah.
But the fact is I can take any PDF using Acrobat, send it to Word, make whatever changes I want to it, save it as PDF and say, nope, see, this is what I've got. So it's no more secure than anything else. We suggest taking a copy of your document, putting it in PDF-A, which is PDF archival version, saving it in a data repository that's secure, so you have proof of the form your document was in at that date. And then put it as Word, accessible Word, or HTML. And then you've got a copy to prove it. You can lock a Word document so that the person can only enter fields and can't do anything else, or can only read only. So they can't do any more changes than they could do to a PDF. But it's going to work better with their technology. Yes?
I've got two questions. Quick one first. You mentioned the sliders for
Carousels?
carousels. What about background sliders?
If it's decorative only, as long as I can stop it, it's okay.
Okay, so as
As long as there's a pause button,
Yep.
I'm okay. And as long as that pause button can get keyboard control.
Okay.
So you've got to be able to get to it. Quite often they put them there, but you can't get a keyboard onto it. Make sure that if you've got things like that, especially a lot of slide carousels have got links in them,
Yep.
and the person can't get in with a keyboard to that link. So if there's links in there, make sure that they're all keyboard accessible, but make sure that they can stop the slideshow to be able to, because if I've got a cognitive acquired brain injury or something, those move so fast that they finally, oh, there was something I wanted and it's gone. Now, is it going to come back? When's it going to come back? It's really not a nice experience. So the forward and back buttons are good, but make sure that they can stop it, and so that they can do what they need to and read what they need in their own time.
A quick other question. I'm a one-man band in the company I work for, and you actually work that you actually have to do, work actually with money in the boss's bank account. So is there like obviously you want to get the site as double A as much as possible, but to be able to spend that time to get it double A, unless you're going to work for lunch break, it's just not going to happen. So is there like a list of stuff that is better to get done than other stuff?
The ones I put in the slide there, images, moving content, links, heading structure, color, those are some of your critical ones. I put in the slides, as I said, you're welcome to have the slides. Those are your critical ones. Keyboard accessibility is probably one of the very biggest, because there are so many users that don't use a mouse. Make sure you can do everything by keyboard, which is where the Coles one created a problem. The screen reader user, because screen readers use keyboard, couldn't actually get to what they needed. So this would be your critical. But if you go to Easy Checks and you sort of cover the Easy Checks items, you'll have caught the majority of those really critical ones. Okay, yes?
Sorry, is there any tool that can actually verify what accessibility standard your website has reached?
There are automated tools, but automated tools will catch 18 to 35% of the issues. For example, they can tell you if you have alternative text for all your images. They can't tell you if it's correct. They could say it's Bob and Jane in Kings Park, and it can be Sue and Ted in Edinburgh. So they can't do human reasoning. It will get 18 to 35%. We did a paper on benchmarking automated tools at the university, and the one that we've recommended to a lot of West Australian government is SortSite, because it's very reasonable to buy. It's about $600 US, and it gives the best ratio of false positives, negatives, and real issues. A lot of them, like if you say everything on the page is bad, then you've got 100% correctness, but you've got a whole lot of false positives. So it gave a very balanced one, and it's really easy to use. You can run that on it. Firefox has got a free wave extension, and you can put that in there, and it will put little red flags next to problems that it sees. For Internet Explorer and for Firefox, you can download the Web Accessibility Toolbar that's available from the Paciello group. If you just Google Web Accessibility Toolbar, and it'll come up. It's free. And they also have a color contrast analyzer that's free. So there are tools that are available, and I think a lot of them are listed on that W3C site. But I've got a card here. If you want to know a bunch of tools and stuff, grab a card and send me an email, and I'll give you a hand.
Just a quick one, just everything with that. Order to 50 web pages, how often?
Well, I would assume that would be, it depends on our development cycle, what we're going to do with the new site. So it's going to be at least annual, if not twice a year. So it's going to be a bit of a bespoke process at the moment. As I said, we're looking at new platforms. So we're going to general audit done. We're not going to go back and get that rating to see if we're then compliant, because we're just going to take some of the learnings on the existing platform, but we will get rated on the new site. And there'll be the foundations for the new, and then we'll go back and get accreditation. And then obviously we need that accredited at the minimum rate.
Because you can get accreditation for your website that you have a sticker that says we comply. If you want to see an example of one on the Disability Services Commission for WA, on the NDIS My Way application that you read from the front page, we've accredited that to AAA standard. So you can have a look, and you can see it's got the DAC Center, which is our user testers, and it's got their accreditation that it meets the user needs. And we think that that's a really good idea. It shows people that you're concerned. Okay, and we're going to let you guys have some lunch. Thank you very much. If anybody wants any more advice, there's some business cards on the table there. You're welcome to take one, and I'm happy to answer questions.